Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Realcomm Live. Today's topic, extremely important. My one word to describe what we're going to be talking about today is foundational. Over the years, 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, we've been talking about smart connected buildings, 21st century buildings, next generation buildings. And you're not going to achieve any of those things without the foundation of a very, very strong telecommunications network. And over the years, the conversation in the wireless world, has ranged from DAS to Wi-Fi. And in recent years, we're talking about things like 5G, CBRS, private networks. And at the end of the day, in order to bring tenants back into office buildings, into malls, you are not going to do it without a very strong telecommunication strategy. And wireless is a major component of that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to bring in the advisory group for the 5G inbuilding Wireless Symposium at the conference. And we typically try not to have 7 or 8 folks on Realcomm Live because nobody gets a chance to really talk. But I wanted to actually bring this group on to show the audience the depth of experience and the brain power that we're applying to this very, very important topic. So with that, let's bring on our guests. I'm going to do a brief intro and then they're going to introduce themselves. So we've got Ilan Zakar, SVP, CTO Car Properties, Joe Rich, EVP, CIO Related Companies, Nick Stello, SVP, IT Infrastructure, Vornado, Mike Osmond, CTO, Bedrock Detroit, John Doolan, President, John Doolan Global Consulting, John Morris, CEO, Ballast Networks, and Jim Whalen, SVP, CIO, CTO of BXP. So guys, I apologize for the hurry, but there's a lot of us, and I want to make sure we get right to the topic. But I do think it's important for everybody to understand your title role as it relates to this in building wireless and telecommunications infrastructure conversation. So Nick, why don't we start with you? Brief little background and why 5G is important to you.
Sure. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. What we do here at Vornado is, we believe that our tenants, of course, are our most important asset, right? It drives everything. And our tenants are really the ones that are requiring more and more infrastructure for in-building wireless. They're asking for 5G. And my role here is to work with various groups within Vornado in order to make that a reality, whether it's a new system in a property, whether it's upgrading systems, whether it's adding another carrier that a specific tenant wants. Our properties have been really focused in on wireless for many, many years, and we're continuing to look at 5G as a serious option. We're looking at CBRS. We're looking at what will make and continue to make our properties and portfolio valuable to our tenants.
And fair to say that Vornado Properties, specifically in New York, very high profile, tenant expectations very high. This stuff's just got to work.
That's correct. So just a quick overview. So we are New York City centric, 26 million square feet, predominantly commercial real estate. We do have 1,664 units of residential, units as well. So you're absolutely right. It's between that, our iconic property in Chicago, the Merchandise Mart, and 2 properties in San Francisco. Our tenants are looking for the best of the best, which we're all trying to deliver.
Exactly. Ilan?
Ilan Zakar, Chief Technology Officer for Car Properties. We're more of a smaller boutique compared to the people on the call today. But for us, I think the 5G, the wireless component is very important because our customers are requiring it. They want to be able to walk into the building on the phone and want to be able to get it to their space, continuing to be on their phone. From the data perspective, I think that we separate the Wi-Fi and the 5G, for communication within the building itself, either through the newer models of the Teams, the Zooms, to be able to continue having conversations there. But also we leverage a lot of the 5G and the Wi-Fi for our IoT and our building systems. So I think that many systems today in the property, in order to be able to really get them to every location that we want, we can't always pull cable. So we do rely on the 5G and also on the Wi-Fi technology to be able to communicate out.
And because you have a lot of Washington, D.C. based tenants, very sophisticated, technically, they have high expectations. Fair statement?
Yeah, for the good thing, on the good thing, we have very low number of leases because we have customers with multiple floors that occupy. And the bad thing is that we have very small number of tenants, right? But the goal here is that customers do require and come in and out the bat ask, what's the phone reception, what's the data reception, what do we get within the building itself? And in some cases, mainly our new development projects require us to actually put a cellular system internally because it's required by the customers themselves.
Jim?
Yeah, so I look at. I'm not going to repeat with what Nick and Elon said, but our customer expectations are really high. We service Fortune 1000 companies, Fortune 500 companies, and the expectation that I could drive. I'm in the Prudential Tower today. Drive into the garage, go up the escalator, go up the elevator, go to the 50th floor, and never lose a phone call is kind of an expectation, and do that traversal through space. Into my employment space. But so that's an expectation, and we have executed over the last 13 years like 33 to 34 million square feet of coverage with DAS, and that has been predominantly done with the same methodology and technology. I mean, it has evolved, but not to an inflection point or not to a change point that changes the fundamental layout of how that gets deployed into our building. So and so the other dimension is really to pick up on Alon's point is really our OT needs, our connectivity needs of the building are only growing, and it's not only just for the number of IP endpoints that we have to support, but you have to do it with security. And so I look at the price per port, like the price of a wired port, and managing and putting security around that port to kind of keep a connection to that. So I'm looking for greater convergence. And I think we're at an inflection point with both the technology and the needs, frankly, and the economics to kind of change the paradigm as we enter the second half of the decade.
Well, when I think about this DAS conversation going back 15 plus years, your name and face comes right to my head, thinking you've been fighting this battle for a long time. Going back, to the early days where it was just DAS, and we were doing 20 miles an hour. How fast are we moving today on the wireless conversation?
Well, Jim, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, the economics have changed, right? So if I look back at the last decade, most of that was covered, driven by the carriers. They funded many of the builds in the buildings around the table here, and those economics changed about 5-6 years ago. And so now we're self-funding those deployments. I mean, in the last 2 days, I've been on 3 DAS calls with my development and construction and PM teams. I mean, it still is a continuing kind of engagement model, but going back to your point, the economics have changed. So now it's like, okay, now we need to rethink about where if we're spending money on this, like what are the benefits are we getting out of it? What are the other drivers that we're trying to meet in our own needs and justifying the costs around some of the expense that we're doing?
Well, Joe, you big assets, high profile assets. Your role and your position on the in-building wireless conversation.
Yeah, similar to my colleagues, our customers are first. We're a little bit inverted in that our largest asset segment is multifamily, but certainly in building wireless, the technology and the issues are the same. Second, we have a large office portfolio in retail, so we're trying to provide the services. And Jim, to your point, it's foundational, and the expectation is also foundational from all of those customers as well. To Jim's point about the economics changing, yes, there's a lot of difficult conversations with our design and construction and development teams. What do you mean the carriers aren't going to fund it anymore? And now what do we do? And I think of it more as I'm trying to think about it more as an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to try to streamline services, streamline that infrastructure as well, and look at the newer technologies more rapidly.
And I think Jim said it, we're at that inflection point where all these different wireless networks, concepts, ideas could be converging. They're not quite there yet, but I think we all see that light at the end of the tunnel where maybe there is one network that handles voice, data, building automation, IoT, and all the different needs that you have with one network that can be secured and looked at from a cyber perspective. So, and it's going to be people like you with the demands pushing the industry to get this to happen. John Morris.
Yes. So I'm the CEO of Ballast Networks, and we're focused on being a managed service provider in the space. We're trying to change some of the dynamics within the industry, focused on private networks as a service, focused on the convergence that Jim and some of the other folks on this call have spoken about. Our dream really is to make sure that you can actually have that private network that's not a separate layer from the rest of your networks, where you can not only save money on the ports, but you can provide offload for a network extension for the carriers and monetize a lot of that infrastructure in a variety of different ways. And we've got a number of